So here's my video. What happened this past weekend back home in Connecticut. In previous video, I had mentioned maybe that I was asked to look at a haunted cafe in one of the towns with a church that I've been relamping. So I'm going to talk about what happened on Friday. So Friday morning, went down to my home church first. There were a few bulbs I needed to change. One had burned out over a stairwell. Don't want dark stairs. So I arrived at the church that morning after making the cemetery run where I put the wreaths on the cemetery. No one came to me in the cemetery this year. Last year, 4 times I felt the light come down. So someone was watching me and following me last year. This year, quiet. So went to the church, and church was open. Went about, got the ladder, and when I arrived, I was confronted immediately. One of the members, who I had told the story to about the various encounters in the building I'd had, but he said right off the bat, "I smelled the smoke. I smelled the cigar. I smelled the cigar." And it's like he didn't say he didn't believe me the first time, but it kind of sounded like he did. And he says, like, I went to the soaper room and I opened the door and I smelled the cigar. So you were right. Like, good. I got confirmation on that one anyway. So now maybe they believe me. Anyway, went in to change the light bulbs, changed one bulb outside, went in, toured the building and the daycare where we had tried to move over the spirit of the deceased drug addict, which the name I got was Ben. Um, see how they were doing, see how their lights were doing. So I go down there, they let me in. It was the owner and the 2 teachers, and like, who are you? I'm Steve. I was here changing the lights and also tried to move the spirit over from. Oh, you're the ghost guy. So each one of them kind of cornered me away from the kids. There was active daycare going on. They took me aside out in the hallway and told me their tales. And so I asked, have these occurred in the last 2 years? And they said yes. Like, crap. Um, I had mentioned previous video during the ghost tours in October we did of my home church that 2 people had come through independently, 2 mediums, and one of the mediums had said, "I feel that Ben, the drug addict, is still in the building." Like, great, not what I wanted to hear after we spent 45 minutes trying to move him over. Anyway, so get to the daycare, and each one pulls me aside. One of the teachers said, when I was walking down the hallway past the boys' bathroom, I heard 2 adult men having a conversation. So of course she goes in, and it stops. No trace, no people, no nothing in there. And then the other person told me that they were in there with one of the children in the boys' room, helping him do his business. And then in the adjacent stall, the toilet flushed by itself. And it is a mechanical toilet, not an electronic one. So you have to push the lever down to get the toilet to flush. So it flushed by itself. Nothing alarming. She kind of laughed it off. All of them are not frightened by any of this because apparently they've had it long enough. Um, and then said occasionally, like, the toilet seat will flip down by itself. So whoever's in that stall likes the toilet. Anyway, um, the teacher or the owner um, said, anything that's been happening has been very minor. Like, sometimes they'll see something start swinging by itself in the daycare, but nothing that's frightened the children, nothing that's threatening or evil or anything dark. Just kind of, humorous kind of little things, and they laugh it off. So I told them individually that you can set up some boundaries and say, look, if you hear something, you see something, you say, look, this is not acceptable. You've been told not to bother the children or us while we're in the space. Please respect our concern. So I said, if you don't set up the boundaries, they're going to set up their own boundaries, even though I told them while we were trying to cross them over that you need to not bother anyone. So apparently it's still happening a little bit, but I'm still a little bit concerned about that. So my next trip, next April, I may be bringing in some bigger guns. They bring in a more experienced medium to figure out what's going on. Anyway, one of the teachers also said that she saw a man in the window outside when she came in, parked, was walking towards the cellar entrance, looked up, saw a man in one of the windows, and she's trying to describe the window. So she finally said, "Just I'll bring you out there." So we went out to the parking lot, and she pointed upstairs to where we used to have a thrift shop in that building, and it was the window right next to that, one of the old classrooms. And she said she saw a man, dark suit, dark hair, and a beard. And I said, well, that's interesting because our church administrator 20 years ago said that, she saw a man outside the office, tall, dark hair, very handsome, appeared in there, did not look at her, did not acknowledge her, and started walking to the auditorium. And so she got up and gave chase, and of course, he had disappeared. I was wondering if that was the same one. So I texted her. I said, did the man you see have a beard? And she said, oh, I don't remember, but he had a dark suit on. So maybe it's the same spirit. Maybe it's not the same spirit. The tally for spirits in this building is getting quite high. Anyway, so she pointed out that window. So I took a few pictures. I went up to that room later. And of course, nothing. But anyway, so they all told me their tales from the daycare center. So that was interesting, but thankfully it's nothing threatening, nothing harmful. The children have not been scared. I don't even know if they've been noticed it, but the teachers don't seem that concerned. But still, I would like to come back in there with an experienced medium and see what happens. So Friday afternoon, I was made my way up to the other town where the haunted cafe was, and they closed at 2 o'clock. And we went in and talked to the owner and some of the employees there, and said, "Oh yes, 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 come on over, come on over." Apparently, a couple things have happened in the building. Didn't seem like that much, but the one thing that the owner and one of the employees both experienced was behind the counter, kind of by the oven. And there's a prep area there. They would be standing there preparing whatever on the counter, and they would feel dripping on their head, like water dripping on their head. And they would look up, and of course, there's no wet spots, there's no water on the ceiling. There is an AC unit on the ceiling, about 5 feet to the left, but it wasn't on, and there was no condensation or anything coming out of it. It was just this weird dripping sensation. So both the owner and another employee said that they heard or they felt that dripping on there. I said, well, anything else? And they said, well, another one of our employees, younger male, said he would go down in the basement and a couple times heard walking around on the floor upstairs when he's the only one in the building. So of course goes back up, there's no one up there, but several times he has heard footsteps walking around the floor. So I said, let's go down. So checked out the basement, and of course, New England, it's a very creepy basement. And, I just checked out the space, not expecting to necessarily hear footsteps, but just want to get the lay of the land and figure, okay, what's going on in here? And that was the encounter. But then the owner went on to say, I'd like you to come to the house, or you should come to the house, because she has a lot more activity at her house than she does at the cafe. And went on to tell tale after tale after tale of all the activity in their house. And so she said her two sons seemed to be most affected by it. And she even got the husband to admit that he had seen and heard things in the house. He seemed very reluctant to admit to anything. I don't think he's quite a believer. But anyway, she said, the sons would hear noises, banging, things moving across the floor. But the most profound thing she told me was the older son has an electric guitar with an amp, and the amp is turned off, especially at night. And once he woke up during the night, and there was crackling coming from the turned off amplifier, and then a voice started to come through the amplifier, which freaked him out, to put it mildly. So I said, well, young children often they're more open. They can experience these things more. You need to learn to set some boundaries. Tell it, you need to leave. Do not bother me. If you need to call in a medium or a priest or whatever you got, if it's threatening. She said, well, it's upsetting, but it's not threatening. Like, well, if something's talking to me through an amplifier at night, I'd be a little bit upset. I think I would be calling a priest, even though I'm not Catholic. So anyway, I said, well, younger children are more open to this. She said, oh, my son's 16. Okay, I think your son has some abilities or is more open. And she said, actually, both sons are probably open and have some abilities. And so I said, tell them to set up some boundaries. Not now. Don't bother me. Don't bother my sleep. I don't want you doing that, especially when we're home. Please stop that. I said it'd probably be worthwhile too to find an experienced medium or someone who gives classes and have him take a few classes and see what his abilities are, like I did with the intuition classes here in Chicago. Find out what the abilities are and find out what he has and what he can do and how to manage them effectively so this doesn't continue to keep happening to him. So that was my parting advice to them. Otherwise, it was an interesting experience. Everything's coming out of the woodwork now, but hopefully I gave them some advice that they can follow. But I'm going to talk about the next day, Saturday, in the next video, because that was a little bit crazier than Friday was. But if you've had any experiences or any advice, please leave it in the comments.